I can't get no satisfaction, but I try, and I try, and I try, and I try. I can't get no. I was going to play that song for you, but that's the entire song. It just repeats that over and over and over again. I can't get no satisfaction, but I try, and I try, and I try, and I try. But I can't get no satisfaction. In the readings today, we hear from the prophet Isaiah that the people are yearning and they're desiring from God, and God is speaking through him and saying, "Come to me, and I will give you food that satisfies you. Come without paying and without cost. Drink milk, and which is not, why spend your money on which is not bread, your wages on which fail to satisfy you." How often do we try to do things that actually don't satisfy us in the end? So I think about the Rolling Stones and kind of that culture that was brought about, really branded through them, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture. And I think that is a good kind of framework to look at ways that we try to satisfy ourselves outside of Jesus that don't actually satisfy. I have someone that I know very well who's been addicted to some pretty heavy things in the past. And I remember one of her children came up to her one day and said, "Mom, why do you keep doing those things?" And she said to him, "Well, I don't know how else to explain it but this. And this hopefully will keep you from ever trying it." And she said, "The very first time I did this, I got a high like you could never imagine. And every time after that, I spent myself trying to get that initial high, and I could never get it again. And it's called chasing the high." There's a phrase tossed around, too, that says, I have an addictive personality, which I do. I think we all do, though. So an addictive personality is when we try to satisfy ourselves with something and we find that it doesn't satisfy us. But we keep trying it. We keep thinking that it might satisfy us. And so I don't want you to raise your hands for this one. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. But the first one, sex, drugs, rock and roll, the first, sexuality. Sexuality is a powerful gift that God has given to us. And he desires that that gift is fulfilled in the context of marriage, husband and wife loving each other, giving themselves fully to each other, open to union and children. And yet we know that sexuality is something that has been hijacked. And many times because we have devices and things pop up all of the time for us, those can be things that we can become addicted to. Things that we intentionally don't seek out at first, but then all of a sudden something crosses the feed and we seek after it. And after seeking after it and perhaps indulging, how do we feel the moment after we indulge? Horrible. You can answer that part, right? We don't feel any better, filthy. The same can be said for drugs, and pretty much everything can have a drug effect into it. So anything that kind of spikes our dopamine, and this one you can raise your hands for. How many of you have started off with a pack of Oreos in your lap, and you're just going to have a few, right? And so you not only eat a few, but the next thing you know, the entire row is gone. How many of you have done that? Or you can raise your hands for that one. Right? So we have all probably overeaten sweets way more than we want. Now, after we finish that entire row or rows of Oreos, how do we feel? Terrible, right? Do we feel satisfied? No, right? We feel horrible. We feel terrible. And the thing that we were trying to to fill actually makes us sick. Now, how many of us have ever been to a party, any time in our lives, where we are drinking a lot and we kind of think to ourselves, I feel pretty good now. Maybe another drink will make me feel even better. And then maybe another drink will make me feel better. And then we have way too many drinks. And after we have way too many drinks, how do we feel? Horrible, right? What happens to us in the morning? Hangover. Terrible, right? So these are things we're trying to satisfy ourselves, and then we drink too much, we indulge too much, and then we feel sick and terrible and hungover. We don't actually become satisfied with that thing that we are pursuing. A new one is social media and phones. So the average time a person checks their phone is once every, how often do you think? I don't think it's that bad yet. Once every 5 minutes. That's including sleep. So on average of once every 5 minutes, we're checking our phones. And then it's called doom scrolling is a new thing too. So doom scrolling is when you go on your phone and you check one of the social media feeds, and then you find yourself just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And then after an hour, you think, why am I still doing this? And we keep doing it, and then another hour might pass, and how do we feel after spending time doom scrolling on our phones? Wasteful, right? Guilty. Is anybody really satisfied, like feel better after spending 3 hours on their phone? No, right? But we still do it. Why? Because we're trying to satisfy ourselves in something other than God. And we try, and we try, and we try, and we try, but we can't get no satisfaction. There we go. But Jesus does satisfy us. In the gospel today in Matthew, we hear about this miracle story of the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes. And the disciples come to him. It's late at night. And he tells Jesus to send the people home, to send them to the markets, let them go buy food themselves. And Jesus says, well, what do you have? Well, 5 loaves and 2 fishes are all that we have. And Jesus says, okay. He takes those 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he works a miracle. And this is really powerful because this is what it says after the people eat. First of all, he tells the disciples, bring them to me. And after they bring them to him, he in turn multiplies the loaves and the fish, gives them to the disciples. The disciples feed the crowd, and at once they all ate and were satisfied. Jesus is the only one that can truly satisfy us. The body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ are the only food and drink that can satisfy us. And yet we try to find that in other ways, and we try and we try and we try, but only he can satisfy. I mentioned the other week that I had been to Africa a few times, and I've also been to El Salvador, just very blessed and privileged to be able to take parishes over the years on these trips. El Salvador I've probably been to about 10 times, and every time I take parishioners, and we experience the poor of the poor, poorest of the poor. And every time at the end of the trip as we're coming back, we will share reflections. And certainly everyone says the same thing. Father, I can't believe how poor they are, but I can't believe how happy they are. Why are they happy? Because they're not being satisfied by anything else on this world. They are so dependent on God as their satisfaction that he brings happiness. And so because we live in America and we live in such a wealthy nation, we may not realize this, but even if we're middle class, we are tremendously rich compared to the rest of the world. But I remember the first time I did a mission trip and I came back, I was in Africa and I had spent some time in the slums of Africa. and saw the destitution and the need and the poverty. When I came back, I remember I was going to Parmatown Mall, actually, when it was really Parmatown Mall back in the day. And I walked through the mall, and by the time I got about halfway through the mall, I started to feel nauseous, actually. And I didn't know what was going on. And so I started to think about it, and I realized, like, I just experienced this destitute poverty. And now I'm walking through this mall, and I'm seeing all these glass stores with jewelry and fine clothes and Auntie Anne pretzels walking by and like food everywhere. And I got to the end of it, and I realized I was sick. It was overwhelming. It was overwhelming to see everything that we have accessible. And what the poor teach us is that when we do not cling to anything else for satisfaction, we will actually discover our satisfaction in God. So it's actually in our poverty that we discover a hunger which only God can fulfill. And so I invite you this week just to pay attention. Just notice. Notice all the things that we indulge in. Notice all the ways that we try to satisfy ourselves and then how we feel after trying those things. And realizing that we probably will get no satisfaction in those things. But those moments of poverty, and this is a great line, every temptation can become an invitation to prayer. So every time we are tempted to indulge in something, let that be an invitation to turn towards God in prayer. Because that aching inside of us, that desire to be fulfilled, God does want to fill it. But often he wants to fill it in our prayer, in our solitude with him, but most importantly, here at the Mass. So as we prepare our hearts to receive this Eucharist, let's just take a moment to realize how we have tried to satisfy ourselves and tried and haven't been satisfied. But know that he can and will satisfy us right here as we receive the Eucharist.